There's a brown bottle sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now that orchid growers quietly treat like liquid gold. It costs about $1, and used the right way, it can stop rot in its tracks, wake up dead-looking roots, and clear the path for the kind of blooms that make your neighbors jealous. Most people have no idea, so grab that bottle of hydrogen peroxide and let's get started. First, a quick word so nobody wrecks their plant. Every trick here uses plain 3% hydrogen peroxide, the standard drugstore stuff in the brown bottle, not the 12% or 35% food grade concentrates sold online. Those are a completely different animal, and they'll burn orchid roots to a crisp. And here's the thing almost every video gets wrong. Hydrogen peroxide is not a fertilizer. It's not a magic growth potion you pour on every week. It's a reactive oxygen species, basically an oxidizer that breaks down into water and oxygen the instant it touches living tissue. That reaction is exactly why it's so useful, and exactly why you have to be smart about it. Used sparingly and at the right moments, it's one of the most powerful tools an orchid grower has. Used carelessly, it kills the good stuff along with the bad. So think of it like a surgeon's tool, not a daily vitamin. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the tricks, starting with the one that actually earns this video its title. Number 1. The post-repot root drench that wakes up new roots. Let's start with the big one, because this is the trick that made hydrogen peroxide famous in orchid circles. Alan Cook of Gold Country Orchids, a commercial grower who's been at this for decades, shared a technique that sounds almost too simple to work. After repotting an orchid into fresh bark, he drenches the pot with a diluted hydrogen peroxide solution, not to fight disease, to push the plant to grow new roots. Here's the science that backs it up. Reactive oxygen species, the exact category hydrogen peroxide falls into, have been shown in plant research to trigger the growth of lateral and adventitious roots in several plant families. In plain English, that means new branching roots and brand new roots sprouting where there weren't any before. Your orchid gets a mild, controlled jolt of oxidative signaling, and it responds by pushing out fresh root tips. And more roots is the whole ball game. Roots are what feed the leaves, and healthy leaves are what fuel flower spikes. You don't get massive blooms from a plant that's barely hanging on by 3 sad roots. You get them from a dense, active root system that can drink up water and nutrients like a fire hose. There's a second reason this works so well right at repotting. Fresh bark and sphagnum can carry hidden fungal spores and bacteria, and a newly repotted orchid has 0 infections established in its root zone yet. Drenching with peroxide at that exact moment sanitizes the fresh media while it's still a blank slate, so the plant can pour its energy into growing instead of defending. You're stacking 2 benefits into 1 pour, a clean start and a nudge toward branching. To do it, mix about 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide per cup of water and pour it slowly through the fresh bark right after repotting until it drains out the bottom. You'll hear a faint sizzle as it hits any leftover organic gunk. That's completely normal. It's just oxygen releasing. Do this once at repotting, and maybe again a couple weeks later if the plant's still settling in. That's it. Don't turn it into a weekly ritual, or you'll start oxidizing the very root tips you're trying to grow, and you'll wipe out the beneficial microbes that help those roots thrive. A little at the right moment does more than a lot done constantly. Number 2, stop crown rot before it beheads your orchid. This one has saved more Phalaenopsis, those grocery store moth orchids everyone owns, than almost any other trick on this list. Crown rot is the silent killer. It happens when water gets trapped in the crown, that little cup right in the center where all the leaves meet. The water sits there, bacteria and fungi move in, and the base of the plant starts turning soft, brown, and black. Here's the scary part. By the time you notice the leaves drooping and falling off at the base, the plant is often days away from dead. Once rot reaches the crown, a Phalaenopsis usually can't be saved. That's where hydrogen peroxide becomes a genuine lifesaver. At the very first sign of trouble, mushy tissue, discoloration, a spot that looks water-soaked in the crown, pour a small amount of plain 3% hydrogen peroxide directly onto the affected area. It'll immediately bubble and fizz. That fizzing is the oxygen reacting with the dead and infected tissue, cleaning it out and stopping the invaders from spreading deeper. Repeat every 2 or 3 days until the bubbling calms down, which tells you the active rot is gone. And here's the critical follow-up almost nobody mentions. Once you're done, blot the crown completely dry with the corner of a paper towel. Leaving liquid sitting in the crown is what started the problem in the first place. From then on, water the roots and keep the crown dry, and add a little gentle air movement from a fan. Prevention beats rescue every single time. Number 3, drown the fungus gnat larvae feasting on your roots. Ever notice tiny black flies drifting up out of your orchid pot when you water? Those are fungus gnats, and honestly, the adults are just annoying. It's their kids that do the damage. Fungus gnat larvae live down in the damp potting mix, and they chew on organic matter, and this is the part that hurts, on your orchid's tender young roots. A bad infestation quietly sabotages the root system from below while you're standing there wondering why your plant looks stuck. And stuck roots mean no new growth and no flower spikes. Hydrogen peroxide wipes them out on contact. Mix 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide with 4 parts water. That gets you down to a gentle concentration that's safe for most houseplants, and drench the potting mix until it runs out the bottom of the pot. As it soaks through, it fizzes and kills the larvae living in the top couple inches of the mix, right where they do their damage. One treatment usually isn't enough though, and this trips a lot of people up. Gnat eggs keep hatching, so you'll want to repeat every few days for a couple weeks to catch each new generation as it appears. And because orchid roots can be more sensitive than your average houseplant, test it on 1 pot first, wait a day or 2, and check for any yellowing before you treat your whole collection. The bonus? That same oxygen burst fights the soggy, airless conditions that gnats and root rot both love. You solve 2 problems with 1 pour. Number 4, freeze bacterial brown spot before it reaches the crown. Here's a trick straight out of the Orchid Society playbook, and it's one most casual growers have never heard. Bacterial brown spot and black rot are aggressive. They start as a small, water-soaked blister on a leaf, sometimes with a faint yellow halo around it, and they can spread shockingly fast. On a phalaenopsis, a spot can go from harmless-looking to life-threatening in a matter of days, especially in warm, humid weather. If it reaches the crown or the rhizome, the plant is done. The traditional treatments are copper fungicides or products like Physin. But copper can't be used on dendrobiums or on any orchid that's currently blooming, and a lot of people don't have a fungicide sitting around anyway. So orchid societies list hydrogen peroxide as the go-to home remedy. Here's how to use it. First, if you can, cut away the infected leaf tissue with a sterile blade, and we'll talk about how to sterilize that blade in a minute. Then spray plain 3% hydrogen peroxide onto the affected leaf and, importantly, onto the neighboring plants too, because these infections jump from plant to plant fast. The peroxide kills bacteria and fungal spores sitting on the leaf surface without damaging the leaf itself. Just keep it out of the crown and off open blooms. Why does this work when the infection is on the surface? Because that's where these diseases start and spread from, a film of bacteria and spores riding along the wet leaf, jumping to the next plant every time you water. The peroxide oxidizes that surface layer of pathogens on contact, breaking the chain of infection before it can dig in deeper. It won't reach an infection that's already buried inside the tissue, which is exactly why cutting out the visibly infected part first makes the spray far more effective. Reach for this the moment you spot leaf discoloration, water pocketing, or any suspicious blister. In a fight against bacterial rot, hours genuinely matter because these things can double overnight in warm weather. Acting fast with something you already own can be the difference between losing one leaf and losing the whole plant. Number 5, the 90-second rescue dip for rotting roots. So you've unpotted a struggling orchid and the roots are a horror show, brown, black, mushy, crumbling apart when you touch them. Before you toss the plant, try this. First, understand what you're actually doing, because this is where people go wrong. Hydrogen peroxide will not cure root rot on its own, and pouring it on healthy roots day after day will dehydrate and damage them. What it will do is clean up an active infection during that critical window when you're repotting. It's a spot treatment, not a lifestyle. Here's the move. Rinse the old mix off under lukewarm water. With a sterile blade, trim away every rotted root back to firm, white or green, healthy tissue. Then mix a gentle dip, roughly 1 part 3% hydrogen peroxide to 9 parts distilled or rainwater, and soak just the root system for no more than a minute or two. Keep the leaves and crown out of it. The peroxide fizzes against the leftover necrotic tissue, debriding it and knocking back the pathogens clinging to what's left. Pat the roots dry, let the plant air dry in indirect light for a few hours, and repot into fresh, chunky, well-draining bark. That's the real fix, because here's the truth. Almost nobody says out loud, root rot is usually a symptom of a deeper problem, a soggy, broken-down potting mix that suffocated the roots. The peroxide buys you a fighting chance, but the fresh bark and better watering are what actually save the plant. Number 6. Cauterize every single cut you make. Think about it this way. A cut on your orchid is exactly like a cut on your skin. It's an open wound, and it's an open door for infection. Every time you snip a spent flower spike, trim a dead root, or divide a plant, you're creating a fresh wound that bacteria, fungi, and even viruses can walk right into. And orchid viruses are the nightmare scenario. They're incurable, and they spread from plant to plant on dirty tools. That gorgeous cattleya you paid good money for can be infected by the same blade you used on a sick plant 30 seconds earlier. Hydrogen peroxide is your instant wound sealant. Right after you make a cut, spray or dab plain 3% hydrogen peroxide onto the cut surface. It fizzes, sterilizes the wound, and helps cauterize it against infection. The same reason growers reach for it when they take a stem cutting to save a leggy, dying orchid. It cleans the wound so the plant can callus over and heal instead of rotting at the cut. This tiny habit pays off enormously over time. Sterilize the cut, keep the wound clean, and you protect the plant's energy for what matters, pushing out roots and spikes instead of fighting off an infection you accidentally introduced. It takes 5 seconds, and it's the difference between a clean heal and a slow, preventable decline. Number 7. Sterilize your tools and pots like a greenhouse pro. This is the trick that separates people whose orchids mysteriously keep dying from people whose collections just keep growing. And it's almost boringly simple. Pathogens don't just live on the plant. They hide on everything the plant touches. Old pots, bamboo stakes, scissors, shears, even the decorative stones in your humidity tray. You can do everything else right, then undo it all by reusing a contaminated pot or cutting with dirty blades. Experienced growers will tell you cleanliness matters just as much as light and water. So before you repot, before you reuse a pot, before you cut anything, sterilize your gear. Rinse pots and tools under hot water to knock off debris. Then soak them in plain 3% hydrogen peroxide for about 10 minutes. Do the same with scissors and shears. Rinse everything with clean water afterward, and you've just eliminated the invisible pathogens that would have hitched a ride onto your next plant. A lot of growers reach for bleach here, but hydrogen peroxide has a real edge. It breaks down cleanly into water and oxygen and leaves no toxic residue behind. Bleach can linger and needs thorough rinsing. Peroxide just does its job and disappears. Build this into your routine, and you create what serious growers call a clean collection. One where a problem on one plant doesn't quietly become a problem on all of them. Number 8. Erase the green algae slime choking your clear pots. If you grow orchids in clear plastic pots, you've probably seen it. That green slimy algae film creeping along the inside of the pot and across the surface of the bark. Most people think it's harmless. It's not doing your plant any favors. That algae competes with your orchid's roots for moisture and nutrients. It can throw off the balance of the growing environment, and frankly, it blocks light. And here's a detail a lot of folks miss. Orchid roots are green because they actually photosynthesize. Those clear pots exist so light can reach the roots. Cake the pot in algae slime, and you're literally shading out roots that are trying to work. Hydrogen peroxide clears it out, a diluted solution, that same roughly 1 part peroxide to 9 parts water mix, poured or sprayed onto the algae, reacts on contact, killing the growth and lifting the film. You'll see it fizz as it hits the slime. For the pot itself, you can unpot at repotting time and soak or wipe it down until it's clear plastic again. There's a hygiene angle here too. That slimy film isn't just algae, it's a damp, crowded surface where bacteria and fungi love to set up shop, sitting inches from your roots. Clearing it out removes a breeding ground before it becomes a rot problem. And because peroxide breaks down into nothing but water and oxygen, you're not leaving a chemical film behind on a surface your roots are pressed right up against. The payoff is a cleaner root zone, better light to those photosynthesizing roots, and a growing environment that isn't quietly working against you. Clear pots were supposed to give your roots an advantage. This keeps that advantage intact. Number 9, the sunburn and cold night first aid spray. Here's the last one, and it's the kind of thing only experienced growers seem to know. Orchids get injured in ways that aren't obviously diseases, and those injuries are secret entry points for infection. 2 big ones: sunburn and cold, wet nights. A leaf that got scorched by too much direct sun develops damaged, weakened tissue. A plant that sat through a chilly, damp night ends up with soft spots and iffy-looking new growth. In both cases, the damaged tissue is now a welcome mat for bacteria and fungi. This is where a quick spray of hydrogen peroxide earns its keep. Orchid societies specifically recommend spraying sunburned leaves to head off secondary infections before they start, and misting leaf surfaces after prolonged rain or cold to prevent rot from taking hold. Growers use it the same way on new growth that looks questionable after a bad night. A light application of plain 3% peroxide to clean the area and knock back anything trying to move in. Think of it as first aid. The plant took a hit and you're disinfecting the wound before it gets infected, exactly like you'd clean a scrape before it turns into something worse. Catch the damage early, treat it, then fix the underlying cause. Move the plant out of harsh direct sun, improve your air movement, and keep water off the leaves overnight. One important warning to close on, because being smart about this stuff is what keeps your plants alive. Hydrogen peroxide is powerful precisely because it kills things, and it doesn't discriminate. It knocks out the beneficial microbes right along with the harmful ones. It's not a fertilizer, and it's not a daily tonic. And it's genuinely not for every orchid. Slipper orchids, the Paphiopedilums, have especially sensitive roots that depend on beneficial fungi, so leave those out of it entirely. Use these tricks as targeted rescues and smart habits, not as a routine. And your orchids will reward you with exactly what the title promised: stronger roots, cleaner leaves, and the kind of blooms that stop people mid-conversation. So the next time you walk past that dollar bottle of hydrogen peroxide, you'll know it's secretly one of the best orchid tools you own. Give a couple of these tricks a try and watch what happens. Thanks for watching. If this helped you out, smash that like button and share it with a fellow plant lover. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video.